Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. I have some tremendous news for you. I know maybe for some it might be salty, and that is understandable, which I will delve into. I was actually deciding whether to do the post game for the Iowa versus Purdue game first, or this news story first, but I decided, well, the result is the result for the Iowa men's basketball game. I can react to that at any point today. It is preferable to be able to do it immediately after the game. But this is just too big of news. Maybe if Iowa had beaten Purdue, maybe I would have chosen this over or that over the news. But as it were, I am going to discuss the commitment for the second time of offensive tackle rather, Kadyn Proctor, who was once committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes coming out of high school for a pretty substantial period of time, only to spurn the Iowa Hawkeyes in favor of the Alabama Crimson Tide in the last minute. I mean, literally last second signing day. And it was, yeah, I mean, there's really no word to assign to to encompass all the thoughts that one has of that particular situation that occurred. Iowa, is too late in the process. They could not find a different offensive tackle prospect. Things seem to be going good. Iowa had a relatively decent year that year. Yes, they did have troubles offensively, but Kadyn Proctor had visited the Hawkeyes like 100 times. His former teammate and really good friend Xavier Wanpa was on the Iowa Hawkeyes and was having success. So Kadyn Proctor was able to look at Xavier and go, well, look at him. He's thriving there. I'll be able to thrive there as well. And it all, for the most part, seemed good. And then there was the visit to the Oregon Ducks, and really nobody knew for sure what was going on. And, I even remember when I did the video, I said, honestly, guys, I don't know for sure what's going on. And I gave a list of possibilities. And one of the possibilities I gave is, just going off of my experience as a collegiate athlete or high school athlete going to college, and some of my friends, two of my closest friends went to USC and Oregon respectively on full ride scholarships. They were highly recruited football players coming out of high school, four-star players consensusly. And I thought that one of the high possibilities was, well, why not take an all expenses paid for trip to Oregon? Why not? If you want to visit some people, you want to see the sites, you want to see the people, you want to visit Nike and get some free gear, why not? That was my guess. But of course, there was more to the story than that. Kadyn Proctor was legitimately looking for a different school to attend. Fast forward today, well, rather not necessarily today. Kadyn Proctor goes to Alabama. He was the day one starter for the Crimson Tide, for a team that was one of the best in the country, a team that made the college football playoff. Okay, he was not just a day one starter for any old usual team. He was a day one starter for a powerhouse, for a legitimate national championship contending program. Nick Saban, one of the best coaches, if not the best collegiate coaches in the history of NCAA football. All things seemed well. Then, of course, out of nowhere, Nick Saban retired. Well, what appeared to be out of nowhere for us on the outside looking in, but apparently the news has circulated that it was not out of nowhere to the players or the University of Alabama. It was discussed, which is why Alabama was able to have a pretty nice head coaching job replacement search for Nick Saban. And that opened up the door for Kadyn Proctor to hit the transfer portal. And the thing is, guys, even when I first saw this news, at this point in the game, or this day and age with the transfer portal, if you are a coveted player, which Kadyn Proctor 1,000 and a million% is, why not hit the transfer portal? Because especially when it's a coaching change, because essentially when you hit the transfer portal, it's essentially you renegotiating the contract that you had when you initially stepped foot on campus. And for all intents and purposes, not only did Kadyn Proctor do well, he completely filled his end of the bargain, and Alabama absolutely got bang for their buck, if you will. Now, I don't want to say that this is all about money. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that the reality of college football, and I've said this a few times now, I've done videos dedicated to this fact. It is college football has turned into the subdivision of the NFL. It is no longer amateurism or pure amateurism. These kids are no longer student athletes. Okay. This is a big business, a big enterprise. These players get money. The top players get money. Hell, even not the top players players that are not top players get money. Okay. This is no longer purely amateurism sports like gymnastics would be for a university, or men's soccer or something like that. Yeah, hell, even those sports, the players likely get some of the money. Okay. This is a business now. So the point is that regardless, if you have a coaching change, it's actually a pretty smart thing. And especially if you absolutely delivered athletically on the field in your play for the Alabama Crimson Tide, why would you not hit the transfer portal? And so, but I was cautiously optimistic. I started seeing some of the crystal ball predictions come in from some of the top writers and contributors in all of college football across the country. Not only the Iowa Hawkeye beat writers or 247 sports writers, but we're talking national writers that are, top of the field, okay, who run the entire site essentially, okay. But I remained cautiously optimistic because I thought, well, Alabama still did hire a pretty good replacement for Nick Saban, or the best that they could do. I mean, honestly, that guy was probably one of the best, if not the best, coaching candidates in the country, both officially on a football team or not on a football team. Okay, just overall, all of the pool of coaching candidates who they were able to replace Nick Saban, that guy was top of the football world. And Alabama was still going to be a legit team. Sure, they were going to have transfers out, and that's just what happens for a school like Alabama. There's so much talent there that it's a prime poaching school. Okay, they're always going to have people knocking down their players' doors for their decommitment from the school. But I was cautiously optimistic. Okay, but of course, in the back of my mind, I knew what had happened before. And in this day and age, what I also know is that players and kids, rather, even though they make money like adults and have a lavish lifestyle, these young adults do get swept up into the hype and the attention and all of that good stuff, and occasionally will, if not often, will go through the motions of the adoration, the campus visit, the attention that comes along with it for all those things. And then we found out that Kadyn Proctor was going to be visiting the Iowa Hawkeyes. He put his name in the transfer portal. He went straight from Tuscaloosa to Iowa City. I don't even think he stopped in Des Moines from what we're hearing. He went straight to Iowa City. He visited the Iowa basketball game. Unfortunately, the Hawkeyes could not get the upset victory over Purdue. That would have been sweet. Sweet. And here we are. Kadyn Proctor committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes. So I'm going to share you know what? Let's start here. I'm going to read the article that 247 Sports has put out, and I'm going to give my concise thoughts on this whole situation and how I think fans should feel about this. All right, here is an article from 247 Sports. News. When Kadyn Proctor announced his decommitment from Iowa in December of 2022, not many believed he would ever play football again in the state of Iowa. Well, those people were wrong, as on Saturday, Proctor announced his decision to transfer to the University of Iowa for the rest of his collegiate career. Proctor, a product of Southeast Polk High School, was a one-time Iowa commit in the 2023 class until he flipped to Alabama in the final days before signing period. Proctor started 14 games for Alabama as a true Alabama. I always love doing that. As a true freshman, Alabama, as a true freshman, and posted an overall pro. I can't remember who I saw say that word like that. I think it's the Mel Kiper. It's just my dad used to always joke. The NFL draft coverage that he does, he would always go Alabama like that, and he'd say it in his Pittsburgh dialect. And posted an overall pro football PFF grade of 66.3 as a left tackle in the SEC. Following the season, there were rumors of Proctor putting his name into the transfer portal, and that smoke started to turn into fire when Alabama head coach Nick Saban announced his retirement, which then had Proctor putting his name into the portal earlier this week. Iowa was seen as the favorite from the jump for Proctor, given his relationship with the staff and players, as well as proximity to home. And by the way, I want to comment on that. It really is a nice situation. If I was an athlete growing up in the state of Iowa and was highly recruited, and obviously I was close with my family. I cared about being around my family and my family coming to my games and stuff like that. And not only if I grew up in the Iowa area or was, an Iowa athlete or Iowa high school athlete, but specifically if I grew up in the Des Moines area, I would rather attend Iowa because it's close, but it's still far enough from home that you have your own unique collegiate experience. Okay, it's not right down the street as Ames would be at Iowa State. Not that Proctor was ever legitimately considering Iowa State, but I digress. Let's see. As well as proximity to home, and after last year's saga, he is going to don the black and gold. Proctor went through his ups and downs during his freshman year with Alabama, but started to progress as the season went on, including a strong performance in the SEC championship with a PFF grade of 78.4, his best performance of the season. 247 Sports tabbed Proctor as the number 2 overall prospect in the transfer portal and the number 1 offensive tackle. Proctor was the number 1 offensive tackle in the 2023 class and the number 5 overall prospect I already said that overall. Talking to Coach George Barnett for sure, and then Coach Tyler Barnes and Coach Jay Neiman, they make sure to check up on me every week, Proctor said in March of 2022. What stands out about Iowa? They're not blowing up my phone like a lot of other coaches do, but they stay in touch, build the relationships. The impact, let's skip that because he said that. And then he said that when he was committed way back when, and then he flipped. The impact. Proctor is a big win for Iowa in the transfer portal and goes to show that it it's always important to never burn bridges in this day and age of college football. I completely agree with that, which I will get to after we're done reading this. Iowa could have easily went the immature way with resenting Proctor after he flipped to the Tide, but the Hawkeyes took the high road as that relationship and bond from the recruiting process shifted over to the transfer portal recruitment, and the Hawkeyes were able to land the Pleasant Hill native. Now, with his starting experience at Alabama, Proctor is going to be the front runner for the starting left tackle job next year for Iowa. I'll also get to that, okay, because I just want to discuss that Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa coaching staff definitely have a past of, sitting talent for the sake of sitting talent and developing said talent. Now, is there something to be said about that? I'm sure. Is it a one-size-fits-all best decision possible? I don't think so. For case in point, 2 points right here, okay? Number one, AJ Epinesa. AJ Epinesa did not start a game in his Iowa Hawkeye career, okay? But he did play a crap ton. But he never started a game because of this develop mindset. All right. Caleb Brown. I told you guys at the beginning of the season that the Iowa coaching staff was, even though I thought it was the wrong choice, what they were going to do was sit him early, give with sparing playing time here and there, a few reps here and there, even though he was fully the best, most talented wide receiver Iowa had from the moment he stepped onto campus. And once Iowa got to week 8, week 9, later in the year, Big Ten play, they would insert him little by little into the starting rotation at the wide receiver position. Check. Ding, ding, ding. Correct. But I'll get to that. That leaves an interesting predicament on the offensive line as Mason, Richmond, and Jennings Dunker started this year at the left tackle spots for Iowa. Richmond could move over to right tackle, though he has started at right tackle for Iowa the past 3 seasons. Let me see. So left tackle, Mason Richmond and started this year at the tackle spots for Iowa. Richmond could move over to right tackle, though he has started at right tackle for Iowa the past 3 seasons. That doesn't make sense. Though he could move over, I think they meant to say left tackle. Richmond also has experience playing guard, while Dunker was a guard for Iowa prior to the 2023 season. Still, this is a good problem to have for Iowa as Proctor immediately elevates the offensive line room for the Hawkeyes, and he'll be a much welcomed addition to an offensive line unit that has battled inconsistency the last couple of years, but has shown progress in the last year with more experience. All right, guys, let me give my analysis here. So, obviously the impact, I think this is well said by Eichholt. Iowa, one of the biggest, Iowa said early on that when it came to the transfer portal and their strategy with it, that they were going to focus on the players that they had on their roster above all else, rather than immediately turning to the transfer portal and putting all their efforts to that, which I think is very smart, because in this day and age, when it comes to players that are actual contributing members of your ball club, what is the real likelihood that you're going to get a player in the transfer portal that's better, especially than a starter or a guy who's in the top 2 deeps that plays a lot? It's pretty rare. And if that guy is available, you're going to have competition. Whereas, there's likely less competition as far as putting that efforts to the guys that are already on your roster. But with that said, Rusty Feth graduates. Like I said, Nick DeYoung returns. I do think that what Iowa is going to try and do, before I get into the rest of my analysis, what I am predicting is that Iowa goes with Proctor at left tackle, with either DeYoung or Richmond at either. Well, let me back up. I think that whoever the Hawkeyes feel is the best pure tackle prospect out of Richmond and Dunker is who will stay at the tackle spot. Personally, I think it is probably Dunker it's they both had their hits and misses. I take that back. I would say it's probably Richmond. I think Dunker in the long term, in his potential, future past college football and, his final year or two at Iowa, he has more upside at the guard position because he's strong. We saw in the hay bale toss that, he's a very strong guy. He wrestled, he rassled. Okay. So I think it's going to be, so it says here that Dunker was guard for Iowa prior to the 2023 season. I think it's going to be Proctor, Dunker, or DeYoung at either guard spot. Whether, whichever one it is will depend. Okay. I can't say for sure whether Dunker will be left guard or right guard or vice versa for DeYoung, but those two will be the guards. And Logan Jones will be the starting center for the Iowa Hawkeyes. That is going to be the starting offensive line. Let's take a look at Iowa's depth chart just so you guys can see kind of who we are working with here. All right. Well, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about Connor Colby. Man, it seems like years ago that he was, it seemed like he was going to be the next great Iowa offensive lineman. He definitely has taken some steps back, but Connor Colby is probably the most experienced offensive lineman the Iowa Hawkeyes have. So now that I see this, I honestly think it will be Dunker and Connor Colby on the inside with Kadyn Proctor at the left tackle and Mason Richmond at the right tackle. That's what I think it's going to be. That's going to be the starting offensive line for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Is it possible that Tyler Ellsbury or some of the younger guys get into the mix? Of course. But that is my prediction, okay? Right now. All right, guys, let's talk about the impact of this outside of what was said here. So I do agree with the sentiment of Eichel, okay? I made a Facebook post which highlighted the fact that Proctor did spurn the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I was more asking, what Iowa fans' thoughts were on it. Is it something that should be forgotten and put aside? Or is it, is it more of a situation where it's like, no, that was still a sucky move to do. We'll root for you now that you're an Iowa Hawkeye, but that was still a sucky move to do. Okay. Overall, here's my sentiment about it, guys. Yes. Did him spurning the Iowa Hawkeyes sting? You betcha. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. You know how much BS I took online from Alabama fans and Iowa State fans and Nebraska fans about Kadyn Proctor spurning the Iowa Hawkeyes at the last minute? Because I had a video posted on my YouTube channel about him committing to the Iowa Hawkeyes. I took so much grief for that. All right. However, with that being said, the bottom line is that college football, as I said at the prelude of this video, is not what it was years ago. If you're expecting college football to be this, loyal, stay, bleed black and gold, bleed crimson red or crimson, or the maize blue and Hawkeye till I die, ride or die type stuff. It is no longer that anymore. Okay. This is not the same student athlete sport that was the case in the 80s, in the 90s, even in the early 2000s. Have there been periods of time where players were paid before now? Absolutely. Okay. Yes, it was going on, but no, it was not going on like it is now. And the thing is, the difference is not necessarily the payment of players, because yes, programs were always doing that. Not all, but a fair amount of programs were doing it and committing various recruiting violations and things like that. The biggest difference is the transfer portal. All right. That is the biggest difference to the landscape of college sports, not NIL. NIL is like the cherry on top of the main issue, which is the transfer portal. And so with that reality being what it is, okay, I am not a big believer in lying to oneself about the nature of something or the reality of something and, playing the fool about it. You need to realize what it is and move forward accordingly. All right. I no longer have attachments to players staying or leaving at the University of Iowa. The time that I stopped having that was probably the whole Akram Wadley saga, when he, people made a whole big thing about would he leave? Would he leave? And at the time when I was in college, I thought, he ain't leaving. Why would he leave? That's ridiculous. He's not going to get drafted. But it got turned into a huge thing. He ended up returning, of course. And then to this day, his family says that it was a huge mistake and, so on and so forth, and has crushed the Iowa Hawkeyes and Kirk Ferentz. And, you guys know the rest. So I no longer get swept up into that, because as an adult, as a fully grown man, it is kind of silly to get swept up into that. And plus, even if it wasn't silly, the fact is that in this day and age, with things being so mobile and so in a state of flux, you just simply can't. Okay. Because you're going to get burned more often than not. There was an article that was posted on on3.com that calculated, I think it was somewhere over 50% of all of the 5-stars in the last 3 recruiting cycles have all transferred from the initial school that they committed to. Matter of fact, I'm going to see if I can find it right now to show you guys. So here it is, guys. Nearly 30% of top 100 recruits since 2021 have entered transfer portal. All right. So that is the nature of college football at this point in time. It is what it is. All right. And so with that said, I don't think that it is in fans' best interest to get swept up into the spurning or not the spurning and hold resentment over that. Did it suck? Did it sting? As I said, you betcha. Okay. But at the end of the day, these are still kids, guys. They are, even though they make all this money and so on and so forth, they're still kids, and they make kid-like decisions often. And so you can only, I guess, react to it so much because it's like asking for water not to be wet. Okay, it's ridiculous. So did it sting? Yes, but I think in the end, what Iowa did was the best call, and it is what I would have advised for myself. That it's just good business to not burn bridges, and I believe that in my professional life, and I think the Iowa Hawkeyes made the right call. The last couple of things that I want to discuss is this is going to be one of the best recruiting classes that Iowa football has had. I know the rankings don't necessarily indicate it full blown yet because I don't know if it's been completely updated, but the overall rank is high school plus transfer portal, and some teams turn over half their roster year to year. They have 20 transfer portal commits and 20 high school commits. Okay. Iowa is the anomaly who doesn't have a ton of transfers out. Okay. It's got Iowa has several 4-star players from the high school. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 4-star players, 2 or 3 that are 4 that are on the cusp of 4-star status. So this is a really, really nice class. I made a post on Facebook, and this is probably the main thing that I want to discuss, is that Iowa is this, in my opinion, and I do say this often, I know that, I think that this will be one of the best, most talented rosters the Iowa Hawkeyes have had ever, ever. Okay, we know what the Iowa Hawkeyes have returning on defense. That defense is littered with NFL talent from every level. The back end, the middle, and up front. The only unit that maybe doesn't have as much NFL talent for sure would maybe be the defensive line, but it's still deep and still talented. I think the only pure NFL prospect at this point, the 2 candidates. Well, I take that back. I would say Iowa has 3 legit NFL candidates on the defensive line: Yaya Black, Aaron Graves, and Deontay Craig. Like most of you, Kadyn Proctor spurning the Hawks at the last minute sucked. Stop coping and saying you have a short memory because it was a brutal loss, plain and simple. With that said, if Proctor lands at Iowa next year, Iowa will have its most talented roster, definitely in the Kirk Ferentz era and maybe ever. They will have 2 former 5-stars on the roster, and we aren't talking about busts. We are talking about 2 former 5-stars who have only improved their stock since getting to college and have continued being the best players in their class. The defense will be loaded, and if possible, where did I start? And if possible, the most talented, with the chance to be the best defense in the Phil Parker era, and that is saying something. So this is a really talented roster, guys. The only thing left is maybe for Iowa to do is, continue keeping talent on the roster, getting that offensive coordinator hired. From what I have heard, it is very difficult. It has been tough sledding for Iowa to get an offensive line or an offensive coordinator hired because, and I knew this was going to be the case when I first talked about Brian Ferentz leaving Iowa, because Kirk Ferentz is still the head coach, and Kirk Ferentz notoriously it does not keep his hands off the offense like he does with the defense for Phil Parker. So, but I also said that if I was Iowa, the selling point that I would have, and now they have another selling point with Kadyn Proctor being on the roster, is if you come here and you turn this Iowa offense around, you will have one of the best things on your resume that an offensive coordinator can have. But it's still, I would be, just being honest, guys, it's still not a super enticing job. So now, is there something that the Iowa coaching staff knows that we don't? Probably. Do they already have somebody that they've decided to hire, which is why Kadyn Proctor felt so good about playing at Iowa? Perhaps. Perhaps. So we'll see. I would say elsewhere in the transfer portal, maybe Iowa, they lost Deontay Vines. They're losing Regini, aka Regini, aka Ragaini. They could probably maybe find one more wide receiver that's maybe more of a developmental prospect that has some nice upside, some speed, some playmaking ability. But I would say, the wide receiver room is pretty full. It's pretty full. And they do have some wide receiver prospects coming in from the this class that's done. They have 2 wide receivers coming in that are both high 3-star players. They're obviously going to have to find a new wide receiver coach as well. So this is great news, guys. Awesome news. It's going to be a very talented roster. I hope you guys like my coverage of this. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow. Facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.